In the heart of the forest, legends awaken from the shadows. The tales of Sasquatch echo through time, a mystery that remains unsolved.
As the smoke clears, the sign stands resolute, a beacon of intrigue. What secrets lie within the forest's depths? The quest for truth begins at Sasquatch Watch Radio. Here's Billy Willard and Gary Kendrick.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Sasquatch Watch Radio. Today is Monday, January 27th, 2025. We got a great show for you tonight. We've got Thomas Sewid here from Sasquatch Island. We'll bring him on in a moment. And before we get him in here, let's get our other host in here. How are you doing this evening, Gary?
Hey, everybody. I just want to apologize. I've got a little bit of a cough. I've been doing some drywall work for my sister-in-law, so a little bit of cough going on tonight.
Got that drywall dust all up in your lungs.
Yeah, I can't be smart enough to wear a mask. I do it.
Well, I bet you'll remember next time.
Yeah, after this I will.
I'm sure you will. All right, so without further ado, we're going to get our guest in here tonight. How are you doing, Tom?
Doing good. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate it, and we got a great show. I didn't know if you knew this or not, but my host Gary Kendrick, he's also Native American. So,
yeah,
this will be an interesting show.
That's good. Looking forward to it.
All right, so I'm gonna let Gary start asking you questions, Tom.
I just want to introduce Tom to everybody. This is Thomas Sewid. I think I said that right.
He's the first one who said it exactly right.
Thomas was a trophy hunting guide for black bear and grizzly bear. He runs a website, SasquatchIsland.com, which is really interesting. He was a pioneer in boat-based whale watching and Sasquatch tours. He operates a eco-culture tourism company and was a commercial fisherman. It's quite a resume.
So that's one of the many things I did. I had to retire from commercial fishing in end of April last year. My right leg gave out on me. I can't work as hard as I used to. The mind wants to, but the body won't let me. So when I flew into SeaTac Airport from St. Louis, Missouri, I was teaching with another Canadian Native Indian. We're teaching the boys down there on the Mississippi how to use the West Coast style fish boats they'd bought and nets to catch the invasive Asian carp. And when I flew into SeaTac and my wife picked me up, I got to our condo in Kent, Washington, and noticed the vehicle parked in my driveway. And I'm like, what's SasquatchLegend.com from Forks? What's their vehicle doing here? And my wife said, well, I got a story for you. Their manager jumped in the car, drove to the SeaTac Airport, parked it, threw the keys on the seat, and flew back to Tennessee. You need to drive it back to Forks, which is about a 5-hour drive. So I was like, yeah, whatever. And I phoned the owners of SasquatchLegend.com, who are good friends of ours, because I've done a lot of my West Coast native art for the T-shirts and other things they sell and the murals on the side of the building. And they said, yeah, drive the truck back. I said, well, I kind of need a paycheck or two. How about I stay there at the company house for 4 weeks and get a paycheck? And they said, go ahead. 3 weeks later, I phoned them and said, hey, what do you think about me managing the store? I got to work 5.5 more years before I get my full Canadian retirement. And they said, go ahead. You got the truck, you got the house, you got your wage. And there I go. I'm here in Forks, Washington on the Olympic Peninsula, which, as far as I'm concerned, has probably got the highest concentration of Sasquatch anywhere in North America that I've been to so far. And I've been to a lot of places. This place is on like Donkey Kong. There's so many reports and activity. We're hearing them. We're, investigating constantly. But Olympic Peninsula, it's a hot spot, and I'm doing investigations here and bringing people out.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to hop right into it. Tell us a little bit about, and I'm going to try to say this correctly, the Zunaqua and her basket.
Zunaqua, yeah, wild woman of the woods, female Sasquatch. I'm a member of the Kwakwakiwak Indian tribe from northern Vancouver Island, British Columbia. You look in the history books and internet, it'll be Kwakiutl or Kwagyoth, but we call ourselves Kwakwakiwak, the Kwakwala speaking people, a nation of 16 recognized tribes that make up the Kwakwakiwak Nation. But we have crests for everything, natural and supernatural animals, sea creatures, ghost world, you name it. But the crests are like having, I guess you could say, a monetary attachment to it. So they have a tier system of the highest ranked crest all the way down to the smallest crest. And the highest ranked crest is Chunahua, the female Sasquatch. And pretty much every family now has it, but in the old times they used to marry properly, we say, and they would acquire the crest and have to pay an astronomical dowry payment in order to get rights to that crest, to use it, to bring the story to life, to bring the song out in the potlatch ceremonies, and of course to display it. So when a chief dies, they'll carve a memorial totem pole for that chieftain, and the crest will tell you a story from the bottom up. And you generally will see the Chunach at the bottom, the female Sasquatch, and it's telling you that, like a Rolex or a Mercedes Benz, his family, that chieftain, was wealthy enough to acquire the Chunach crest, the highest rank one, and it's on his memorial totem pole. Then above that, there'll be other crests telling a story about that chief and his family. But a lot of stories are passed on to our children, our what we call kingananum. So, like my children and like me from my parents, especially my Kwakwakiwak father, when I was young, it was like, hey, Tommy, you behave yourself. Chunahua, the female Sasquatch, watching you from the bush. She pulls a branch down and looks at you. And she watches you and she can't touch you. But you act up like you're doing right now, misbehaving, not doing your chores, pulling a temper tantrum, fighting, thieving, not doing your schoolwork. Jonah is going to come at night with a big hairy arm. She's going to shove it through the window where you're sleeping and grab you, rub spruce tree sap like tar in your eyes so you can't open them and you're blind. And she's going to throw you in that basket on her back and carry you deep into the forest, up a mountain to her invisible home. That's why we can't find Sasquatches. And that's where she's going to boil up the bad children and eat them. So you behave yourself. And I remember as a kid, hearing that, and I was like terrified. And I remember one time I went to the south side of Alert Bay, the island I was living on, born on, and all of a sudden I looked up and the sun had gone across the channel, behind the mountains of Vancouver Island North. And I'm like, oh no, I'm misbehaving. I'm not home. It's almost dark. And I was running down the street. It's paved and there's cars going by. But all of a sudden I got to the shipyards and I stopped. Across the street was this big brown 2-story house. And I just kept thinking, oh God, I got to go past that house and I'm going to be in front of the graveyard and all those totem poles with the Chunahua with outstretched arms and sleepy eyes and puckered up lips and her big breasts. One of them might run from the bush and grab me because I'm misbehaving. I remember crying and running with as fast as I could with my short little legs. And all of a sudden, one of my aunties pulled over. Tommy, get in. What are you doing? It's dark. I know it's dark. I want to go home. And she dropped me off at my house, but she had to walk me up the stairs to the door because I was so terrified of Chunahua, the Sasquatch. So it's been with us since we were children. And then as children, and we're brought up to the Kilksi, the ceremonial big house, which is where we have our great potlatch ceremonies and feasts and other what we call dues. You would go there to witness a chief and his family's potlatch, and you would always see the Chunahua mask and the regalia of fur, like I guess you could say outfit, but the right term is regalia. And some of them would have a basket on their back, like my family. Some of them would have a sack. Some of them would have a baby one come out with them, a small one. So every family, when they see their Chonokwa performance in a ceremony of potlatch, what they're telling you in dance and song is what an ancestor witnessed. And usually when the Chonokwa comes out, she enters the floor of the ceremonial big house, and beautiful sight. There's all vertical posts and horizontal beams and rafters. Walls are all painted and carved with native Kwakwakiwak crests with a central fire. So it's like being a spiritual realm. And then this hollow cedar log 4 feet thick, 20, 30 feet in diameter, with men with wooden batons pounding on it. And in deep baritone song, they're singing. And you'll see the Tunacha come out with that mask and fur regalia, maybe a basket on her back. She'll do an anti-clockwise circle, which is our etiquette before you dance. And as they enter the floor, they'll rub their eyes, yawn, because what they're telling you is when the ancestor, who's a human by daylight, ran into a Sasquatch, a Tunacha, it was sleeping. That's why it's yawning and rubbing its eyes. You spooked it. You woke it up. And then all of a sudden it goes through the posturing of going like that, whoop, 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 calling like Sasquatches do at night. And then sometimes you'll see them reaching out and they're depicting grabbing those misbehaving children. And then you'll see my wife, when she does ours, go like that, representing throwing those misbehaving children, the Tunacha captures and throw them into the basket on her back. So that's what the Kwakwaka'wakw potlatch and how we, I guess you could say, show respect to the Tunacha, the highest ranked crest, the female Sasquatch. And on the very rare times a family has a memorial potlatch for their chieftain, that's the only time that you'll see the heir apparent, the heir to the throne, whose chief speaker at the end of the potlatch is saying, does anyone contest that this man has not done his obligations of inviting you all to this family potlatch in honor of his father or uncle who passed away? And he's feasted and fed you all. And there's over 1,000 of you that have been here for the whole day and into the deep night. And he's opened his gildas, his symbolic box of treasure, and showed you all their wealth, the crests, and of course, Tunacha being one of them. And now all the gifts are being put on the floor. And nowadays, you'll see over $100,000 worth of a family's wealth be put on plastic tarps on the dirt floor to be handed out to everyone that isn't a direct family member to pay tribute and respect. Thank you for coming to our potlatch and witnessing our celebration of life and our memorial potlatch. And then that's when the helicom will grab a male carved mask of a Tunacha, a male Tunacha, but it's got a different name and I just can't pronounce it in Kwakala. I can't remember. But that's when they'll either hold it on his face or strap it on him. And he'll say, does anyone contest that he is not done his duties to now be the Queek, the clan territorial hereditary chief of this family and clan? Of course, no one contests it. And then he says something in Kwakala that means now he's been touched by the male Sasquatch. And that's where, with the male Sasquatch mask, he goes out in his button blanket and apron and cedar bark rings. And with that male Sasquatch mask on with the mustache and the goatee of fur, he's out there dancing. And what he's doing is proclaiming, I am now recognized as the new Queek, the new Eagle Chief of this clan. Or, a regular term for a chief is Gekame. It means the chief. And that's what it means to be a Kwakwaka'wakw. And I'm so honored to be a member of the Kwakwaka'wakw Nation, because when I share with people my life's experience being a grizzly bear hunting guide, black bear hunting guide for over 24 years, living in the bush for over 26 years, being a commercial fisherman when I wasn't in the bush, but that basically is bush and water, because sometimes we'd be out in the middle of Timbuk flipping nowhere and looking at the tide book, like, hey, tonight, 11 o'clock tonight's going to be a -1 foot low tide. We should go to the beach, grab a couple hours sleep, and we'll wake up and we'll go ashore with the dinghy and we'll put our headlamps on and our Coleman torches back in the day, or lanterns, and we'll go dig some shellfish, some clams. But what we really want to dig is choli, cockles. It's like a clam, but it looks like a scallop, but it's really big like a potato. And when you steam it for 40 minutes, it opens up and it looks like a big prawn or shrimp tail. And when you eat it, it has a flavor that is so robust and unique. It's like the ultimate delicacy. It's almost in between a prawn, shrimp, and an abalone, which are so threatened now we can't even harvest abalone in the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia. But it's also the favorite shellfish food of the Sasquatch, the Tunacha. And that's why when you're out there with your headlamp, you might hear a big slap of a tree or crack, Or you might hear, with no wind, a big dead tree being pushed down, crashing and exploding in the forest. And what that is the Sasquatch telling you, you're on our beach. We wanted to come shellfish dig, but now you're in our refrigerator. So what you do is you always look at the youngest clam digger. Hey, you 16-year-old punk, go grab that basket of chole, the cockles, and you walk that 80 yards up to the beach, get to the trees, which is just a wall of ink black, and you throw those chole, those cockles in there for the chunacha, the Sasquatches. Oh, I remember some of those kids would come running back full tilt, maybe tears coming down their eyes. Oh, my heart's pounding. I was so scared. Big hairy arm was going to come through the bush and grab me. And of course, all the older guys, we'd be laughing away. But I had my turn 2 or 3 times where it was me running up to that dark bush. And I remember one time going up there, you could hear that inside the black bush, the wall of trees. You could hear that Sasquatch smelling what I was. And then you could smell him, that rotten human stink, like opening up a hockey or lacrosse or a soccer bag from a teenager and it hasn't been washed in who knows how many months, and you get that human rotten stinging gagging odor. Well, multiply that 30 or 40 times, that's the smell of a tuna Sasquatch.
Well, Thomas, I've got a question from one of our guests, or from one of our viewers here. Earl wants to know, why is the female rated higher than the male?
It's not. The male's rated higher. That's so rare that you only will see it when that heir to the throne does that potlatch. So, a chief, while he's alive, might have 3 or more potlatches. But when he dies, he's not going to hold another one. It's going to be the next one in line. And that's why it's so rare to see that male chonacha mask on the chief, the heir to the throne, who's now recognized as the chief of the family and the clan. So it's the male one that's very rare and higher level on the tier.
Got it.
All right, I've got another one here. This one's from Mick up in Canada. Where do you think Sasquatch take shelter in the winter, and what do you think they mostly feed on when it's very cold?
So, because I'm Pacific Northwest coast all my life, but I've been into the interior during the winter and freezing my stuff in my nose and thinking, why would anyone want to live out here? But then being an investigator, living up in the Northwest Territories for over a year and experiencing over minus 40 degree temperatures and working outside during the daytime and snowmobiling a couple hours before daylight because I was exploring and feeling that bitter cold. I too, up there, wanted to know, what does the Naga, where do they take shelter, their Sasquatch, from this cold? And I would find out by interviewing people, because my 2-3 hour every few days excursions on snowmobile, I never did see tracks. Saw moose tracks, saw caribou tracks, everything else, but I never did see the track of Naga. But interviewing those people, they enlightened me that, oh, we know where they are, that mountain that you were talking about, where you heard stuff and had things thrown at you. And Northwest Territories doesn't have very many mountains in the central part. It was sort of a oddity seeing that big mountain. That's why I went up there. And it had like little canyons where the water runoff would come down and so forth over millions of years. And that's where we suspected they were taking shelter. And sure enough, the people up there, especially the elders, confirmed that's where they hunker down during the winter time. But on the coast of British Columbia, the other night on season 6 of Expedition Bigfoot, I had to beg to differ to what Bryce and Maria were saying about, and even what's his name there, Russell, about we're in the fork and this is the migratory routes possibly. I had to, no. Sasquatch is like any other Indian. They don't like walking far. That's why we got bigger shoulders. We're built for paddling. Sasquatches have big legs and that, but they're not stupid. They don't want to go in northern California to southeast Alaska. They don't do that. The odd one might, the traveler, which in my language is called, in the old days, was Clisla Gila. You always had that one vagabond in your family that go, hey, instead of sitting here year round, I'm going to go for a little walkable and go took a look. And they would come back and tell us about the Skookumchuck on the other side of the continent and the great fields of blowing grasses and buffalo and finding eternal winters to the south, which was Mexico and beyond, and seeing cedar trees down there that were covered in thorns. We didn't have a word for cactus, but the cactuses down there looked just like the candelabra cedar tree, except the translation was cedar tree with thorns. So Sasquatch, when you study them in your region of study, can't just do the whole Sasquatch Island, North America. You got to be site specific to your backyard. It might be the Cherokee, it might be the Choctaw, it might be the Arapaho, the Apache, the Kwakwaka'wakw, the Cree, Iroquois, and the list goes on. So what you do is you read the anthropological history of the native tribe where you're going to be studying your Sasquatch and investigating. And you correlate the seasonal migrations of that tribe to the seasonal harvest zones, be it trout or salmon or kokanee in the river or smelt, fresh shellfish that are in fresh water found in rivers. When the water goes down, they can access the mud flats and go after the clams and the oysters in the freshwater species and out in the salt water. And then you have the buffalo that might show up, or where the deer converge, or where the lush grasses are going to be up in alpine, and that's where the ungulates, the hoofed animals, will go do fawn drop in June and May, June, July, because it's so lush and it's a lot of milk production. But they can also see, smell, and hear and run away from threats to their fawns and themselves. So when you look at that, the Indian people did that seasonal migration based on all those abundant seasonal proteins and foods. Well, so too does the Sasquatch. And then when you study the local Indian tribe and you go, geez, well, maybe I better go up there to the marshlands because, like Tom said, the bulrush is the year-round food. You can harvest the rhizomes, the roots, when before spring and in spring. You can harvest the stalks and eat that. You can harvest the what would turn to fluff and seed, but it's like a corn at a certain time of the year. But in this time of the year during the winter, you can go break the ice and dig up through the mud under the ice, the rhizomes for the spring growth. So that's where Sasquatch is going to be in the wintertime, where the high abundant foods and proteins are. And of course, bulrushes being basically starch, sugar, it's year-round food for them. But at the same place where there's an abundance of frozen marshes and edges of ponds or even backwaters of channels from a stream, rivers, there's the bulrushes, but there's also, because the deer and elk came from the high ground and they're down in that lowland, they're going to be there too because all the track, and that's where you're hunting during hunting season. Well, that's where the Sasquatch is going to be. And then when spring comes, when the berries come up and the tubers, and then the alpine, as the snows in the Pacific Northwest recede and the alpines up on the top of the mountains above tree line, it exposes ungulates and other animals that died during the fall's first snowfalls. Deer were too stupid to heed the warning and come off the mountain. And all of a sudden they wake up under the spruce tree they were sleeping under, and there's 4.5 feet of snow and it's still coming down. And next thing you know, 2 days later, they can't find food. They die of hypothermia. But as the snows recede in May and June, it opens a freezer lid. And there's thawing out deer, elk, mountain goat, marmot. And the Sasquatches just need to look up and see the ravens and the turkey vultures and the eagles and know that there's fresh food being exposed by the receding snow. And because it's early spring, and a lot of people will go, well, in many cases it would be carrion, but every indigenous tribe of people from North America, Central America, South America, Australia, Indonesia, China, Asia, Europe, we all can follow our ancestral paths, and still to this day, we're still exercising the eating of rotten food. Marmite, for example, from Australia, the what do you call it, fermented vegetables in a little jar they use like peanut butter. Ugh, I can't even stand the smell of that stuff. And then the Europeans would hang pheasants and ducks by the neck until they decomposed to a point where the neck head separated. And the next morning, when that happened and it fell on the floor, they'd pick it up, pluck it, clean it, and eat it. It's a delicacy. Apparently, some people still eat that. In the Arctic of Alaska and Canada, they'll eat what they call stink flipper, or they'll take a seal carcass and clean it, fill it up with seabirds, sew it up, bury it in the soil, and months later go back and open it up, and it's a delicacy. My people, we eat Klitna, hooligan oil. It's oil derived from the smelt or hooligan that we put on the ground for 8 days or so to soften the flesh. Boil it, and the oil that comes to the surface of the vats, and steam off, filter it, and we use it like Indian ketchup. I call it in Kwakwakiwak Viagra. It's real good stuff. But you two, you're either going to love it or hate it if I shared it with you. And probably more than likely, you'd start gagging and retching because it's so potent to you. But Sasquatches, when they see, and we hear the stories from Vancouver Island of the marmot biologist who shared with me how he found avalanche chutes where the ice never melts year round, and accumulations, vast accumulations of bones, elk, deer, marmots, you name it. He found it in there. And he said it was years, decades, who knows how many years of bone accumulation. And one time he was up there and he saw a Sasquatch run from one of those avalanche chutes, look at him, grimace, make a threatening posture, and just, he said it was like it was swimming up the mountain and it was going like a lightning bolt and disappeared. And he, of course, went to look what was up, and he found meat in there, animal parts with hide on it. He said it didn't stink. It just smelled like any other meat that would be, freshly harvested because it was in that cool condition. And that's when I started putting two and two together, thinking, I think these Sasquatches, when we see the pictures and videos of Sasquatches trumping in early spring, walking in the snow above tree line, sure, they might be going from A to B, going to look for a mate and start a new family clan, or maybe going to communicate with the neighboring clan over the mountain. But then again, there's some reports that I get because I ask the questions that, oh, I didn't think of that. You're right. When we go up there hunting, we've seen evidence of Sasquatches where the snow doesn't melt year round. I think they're possibly using refrigeration to a certain extent. So in other words, you're up there in August and you take out a couple elk and you're eating a deer, your belly's full, your family's happy, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, look, we can see the white backs of the seagulls down in the creeks and rivers below. We can see the sun sparkling off the back of the soaring eagles above those creeks and rivers and streams. Oh, the salmon are in. Oh, gee, we got too much food to bring down the mountain. Well, let's go pack it up to that avalanche chute and shove it behind the ice, put some blocks on it, go down, feast on salmon. And in the wintertime, we'll go to the shellfish beaches. And in springtime, when it gets kind of lean, like around in the Pacific Northwest, February into early March, when the smelt, the hooligans show up in our streams, that's the first really abundant protein, and the herring and end of February, beginning of March. But if they don't have smelt or herring or hooligan, maybe it's, well, I'm going to go up the hill. I'll go grab some meat that we put away back in late August. And that's where I think Sasquatch is how they're living through the harsh winters of the Pacific Northwest and elsewheres. I think they have enough wherewithal because I believe they're just big, hairy Indian humans. I call them humans of the night, the perfect human. And I believe they have the wherewithal, like all indigenous tribes in North America, Sasquatch Island, to use refrigeration to a certain extent. Like when I spoke about stink flipper and seal carcasses filled with seabirds and sewn up and put into the ground. You got to remember that up north, there's ice a couple feet under. It's called permafrost.
Yeah.
So it's, the heat of the sun, of course, is warming it up and fermenting the flipper of the seal in a glass jar nowadays, or the carcass of a seal with seabirds in it. But when you do dig it up, it's half and half. Got the heat from the sun above soils and the cold from beneath. But still, it's fermented. It's carrion. And Sasquatches, I see from my research, are doing the same.
Interesting.
Excellent.
Interesting. So before we get the
Sasquatch Island,
next question, before we get the next question, remember I asked you about music, Tom.
Yep.
So I'm hoping that artificial intelligence didn't just kill this. It claims this is trance music. So you can tell me if it is or is not trance music after we get through it.
Yeah.
And then so we'll find out. It's a couple minutes long. It's called Searching for Bigfoot. It's about you. So let's see if I did a good job of doing this.
In the forest, dark and deep, Thomas Sewid, secrets keep, whispers round the ancient trees, legends float on the breeze. Searching, searching, night and day, Bigfoot's out there, so they say. Stories told by firelight light, dancing shadows in the night. Elders share their tales so old, art of legends carved in bold. Thomas Sewid, heart in hand, walking through this mystic land. Searching, searching, night and day, Bigfoot's out there, so they say. Stories told by firelight light, dancing shadows in the night. First nations on some share, beat of drums and guiding lights, lead the way through endless nights. Searching, searching, night and day, Bigfoot's out there, so they say. Stories told by firelight, dancing shadows in the night.
All right, you're the judge, Tom. Did artificial intelligence do it right or not?
That was really good. I like that. It was kind of a little bit breaking up here because I'm in Forks, Washington, but that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I have to listen to it on your guys' radio show.
That's pretty good.
I really
I can
enjoyed that.
send
Thank
you.
very much.
I can send a copy of it to your email too.
Sure. Okay.
It kind of reminded me of the old
All right.
1980s techno music.
Oh yeah.
Mick's got another question there. If I can get my mouse to work here. The people of the Salish First Nations village were reported to flee from something. Do you know anything about that? And was it Sasquatch related?
More than this, Salish. Salish are a big tribe, one of our bigger tribes in the Pacific Northwest, Washington State into southern British Columbia, southern Vancouver Island. I just know of, no, I don't. I haven't heard of any from the Salish being, oh yeah, I did. Yeah, up just north of Vancouver, one of the tribes up there, apparently that, yeah. You got to remember, some of our villages were one family, one house, could be anywhere from 10 people to 40 or more. But anyway, I did hear of one years ago having to vacate. A famous one on the British Columbia coast is Bishop's Cove up in Kitasoo, Hasla tribal territories of north central coastal British Columbia. Bishop's Cove is quite famous nowadays because it has a hot springs that has a cement structure and a roof above it, and you anchor out and dinghy ashore and go up the dock and go hot tubbing in the hot spring in the middle of nowhere. and it's just amazing. We went there lots as commercial fishermen, but there's a really good account, and it's in the book that's no longer in print. It was a novel that was yellow, and it had the film frame from Patty, Roger Patterson, Bob Gimlin back in the day. And I bought that novel when I was a kid. I just wish I'd never lost it. But that's where I remember reading about Bishop's Cove and how I guess the sailing ship cutter back in the early 1800s was going up McKay Reach and came across a flotilla of Indians paddling. And hey, where are you guys going? Oh, we had to leave our village and what would be Bishop's Cove eventually, because the Sasquatch were throwing things at our houses and, you know, aggressive to our tribe members, and were out shellfish digging and hunting and foraging for berries and tubers and other things. That's one of the big famous ones for being chased away by the Chunuk, the Sasquatch. But you got to remember, you always hear the grandiose ones. You hear the terrible ones. Oh, what's his name? I was just reading them on the internet today. Muchalat Harry on the west coast of Vancouver Island. He went to the Canuma River to go trapping, and he walked 12 miles, beached his canoe, and walked 12 miles at the Canuma River on western Vancouver Island to go trapping for the fall, early winter, and woke up to being manhandled, and all of a sudden figures he went about 2 miles. When the sun came up and it brightened up, here he was around up to almost 20 Sasquatches of different sizes, male and female. And they were all curious, grabbing at his wool long johns that he was in when he was sleeping under his blankets. And he stuck around for a bit until they lost interest with him and went about their business, he stated. And that's when he bolted barefoot and got to his canoe, jumped in, paddled back to his village almost 40 miles away. And he was a basket case until he could finally talk about it. Who knows, days, weeks later, where he could finally tell what happened. He was no different than Chapman when Chapman got picked up in his sleeping bag with his rifle, his snuff, and his coffee, and because he thought porcupines were getting into his kit when he was out trapping, but it was actually a Sasquatch, and that's why he put his coffee and coffee can and his salt and his snuff and his rifle into his sleeping bag. And Sasquatch grabbed him, threw him over his back. Hours later, when the sun come up, you could see that he was there with the big male that kidnapped him, big female, its mate, and juvenile male and female that he depicts as being like teenagers. So that's what we always hear about. We don't hear about, and that's what I'm sharing about, is the Indian tribes, over 600 throughout Sasquatch Island, North America, have a name, stories, beliefs, understanding, perspectives, but we all share the same thing. Don't ever, ever think of killing a Sasquatch, and don't ever disrespect them. Always, yo, hello, how you are? I don't know who you are, Sasquatch. And you might hear an answer back, as some of the reports depict. Omaha Indian tribe that I spent some time with. Aho, Sitonga. Hello, Sasquatch, keeper of the medicine. And, other tribes, the same thing. And that's why a lot of our tribes don't have the Stephen King version of our interaction violently with Sasquatches, because we've learned how to always respect them, live in harmony and balance. We're the hairless bipedals of the day. Sasquatch is the hair covered bipedal of the night. And together we can live in harmony. And we've been doing that since the dawn of our creation. Thousands of years we've been living together in harmony. And that's what I convey the message, is we have to keep doing that. You can't be like those shows where they want to go kill them. Like, I work for SasquatchLegend.com, the largest Sasquatch store and museum in North America, here in Forks, Washington, on the Olympic Peninsula. And when I got here, they had stickers, because we sell a multitude of stickers, but it was a Washington State Sasquatch hunting permit. I took a pair of scissors and cut the 20 or so that were remaining in half. And when the boss said, we're going to do a sticker order, here's the ones we're going to get, I said, don't send those Washington State Sasquatch hunting permit ones. Ethics and integrity won't allow me to manage your store and sell that garbage. and he respects me by not doing it.
Yeah. Yep.
I know you talked a lot about different native cultures. I'm part Cherokee and part Shawnee, and in the Cherokee culture, there's actually two different kinds of Bigfoot. They have the Sukaloo, which actually helped the Cherokee. It stayed with them. It actually even learned to speak some Cherokee. And then they have the Nunaway, and the Nunaway was a cannibal. It actually hunted and killed Cherokee and feasted on their livers and their brains. Is there anything similar to that in your native culture?
Oh, absolutely. Jonarka, she's a cannibal, kind of cannibal giant. She's going to eat you if you misbehave. And if you disrespect the Jonarka, the Sasquatch, they might eat you. I heard that one once when I was a young man. And then, of course, the multitude of other stories about Sasquatches doing it. And then people come to me, well, why would they do that? I said, well, I belong to the Hamatsa Society of the Kwakwaka'wakw. Hamatsa means human flesh eater, cannibal. When we dance on the stage, what that's translating is feed me human flesh and blood. When we dance on the floor, we're depicting the taking out of an enemy, the rubbing of blood on our bodies, the wrapping of the intestines around us, the consuming of the flesh, and then we start posturing like the huku, the bird that comes out of Bakbakwala Nuksui, the cannibal from the north end of the world's realm, and smashes human skulls and impales the victim and sucks his soul out for eternity. And then comes the crooked beak of heaven, and we dance. We actually do like that, and you'll see it on if you go to YouTube and type in Hamatsa dance or Hamatsa or Humpsamala, Hamsamala. You'll see our dances and potlatch that depict that. And then people will go, well, why would your ancestors do that? And I'm like, well, we like beings, human beings. Every culture in this planet has practiced cannibalism. Europe, Asia, Indonesia, the list goes on. So, it wasn't until Christianity came that they started to, shh, those are things we don't speak about. Even my Kwakwaka'wakw tribe is contaminated with Christianity, where some of my high-ranking matriarchs, shh, I'm Pentecostal. We don't talk about that. Oh no, we weren't cannibals. There was no cannibalism. No, you don't do that. You don't use Christianity to dilute your culture, your heritage. And Sasquatches, you know, some of them, like your background, where some are the good people that got along with us. Well, most of our Sasquatches got along with us as well, and other tribes in the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere. But then there was always the one areas where they spoke of the cannibal giants, their translation of their name, cannibal giants, cannibals from the forest, cannibals from the mountains, the big hair covered cannibal. And now you think about it. Why would Indian tribes translated Indian name for a Sasquatch use the term cannibal? Well, it tells you right there what a Sasquatch is, because if a grizzly bear, a black bear, a bunch of coyotes, a wolf pack kills a human and eats it, we don't call them cannibals. We call them human killers, and then we go and squeeze the trigger and pop their head like a zitter, let the air out of their lungs and heart. So when Indians are terming Sasquatches as cannibals, they're telling you they know exactly what the Sasquatch is. It's a human. That's why it has the title cannibal, because they happen to like eating other humans, others of their species. So that's when they become a cannibal. Even gerbils, rats, mice, they'll cannibalize one another. We use that term with other species of critters on this planet. So if a Sasquatch eats a human, it's a cannibal. It's a human of the night, the big hair covered Indian, like I call them, and the perfect human. And the reason why I call them the perfect human is because we have depictions of pictograph in North America depicting Indians fighting with spears and bows and arrows with big hair covered bipedal creatures without weapons, Sasquatch. We know Sasquatches don't use fire, don't use tools for the most part, don't have permanent shelters, don't have clothing. So live in harmony with nature, see us and show us their back end and leave. Why? Because they know we're the imperfect bipedal human. We have evolved to lose our hair, to lose our height, to lose our girth, lose our nocturnal vision, lose our pronounced philtrum, distance from our upper lip to our bottom of our nose, our ridges on our eyebrows in some places in North America, our conical heads. So when you go see the doctor and you go, how come when I don't shower, my armpits stink? It almost makes me want to gag. Well, that is because our ancestors used to have scent glands in their armpits and they could excrete an odor when they felt threatened or intimidated. That's why I have a capital D small r period before I name, because I'm so smart. I'm a doctor. What he just told you was the origin of us. Our ancestor is the Sasquatch. They still have the scent glands. They still have the hair, the pronounced philtrum, the brow ridges, the conical head, but they hung on to something we lost in evolution. They didn't use fire. They didn't use tool. So in turn, we live in a world right now with Trump, Putin, and many other leaders of countries with their fingers above buttons ready to eradicate us with nuclear bombs. That's the world we've evolved. So have we progressed to perfection or have we regressed to inferiority as a bipedal species on this planet? And that's why I say the Sasquatch is the perfect human.
Okay, I got a question. It's really weird, and I try to ask all the guests this, but I'll explain it as I go along. Animal, mineral, or vegetable? You believe that Sasquatch is a living animal? You
Yes.
think that Sasquatch might be in the mineral category, interdimensional or extraterrestrial, or the vegetable category? Do you think it may be spiritual, or do you think it may be a combination of all of them?
So number one, from my fellow Indian tribes of North America, Sasquatch Island, I know some of them believe in the spiritual aspects of Sasquatch. I totally respect that, and I'll never debate it or try to convince any of those tribes to change their mind about it. Me, I'm 100% critterist because of the 6 close encounters with Sasquatch, where I could see the tendons on their neck and their teeth and their plaque and their eyes and their muscles grimace when they grimaced at me. And when they looked at me, like, surprised. Well, I just ran into a hairless one. And I'm like, holy smokes, I just ran into a Sasquatch. So in those 6 encounters, plus the over 30 other encounters I had where I knew they were in close proximity to me, and I saw them or saw the trees moving, smelled them, heard them, not once did I ever have what I call the woo. I never seen any cloaking, portal jumping, UFO flying, never had no mind speaking. So to me, with all the experience that I've had with them, and a lot of people I'm sarcastic. It's just my character, my nature. When people come in to the store, you don't honestly believe in Sasquatch, do you? I'm like, well, I'll tell you the truth. When you were enjoying flush toilets and switches for lights and heat, beds, I was living under a tarp, a plastic tarp, 8x8, strung between trees with my hammock underneath because I hated tents. I never slept in a tent until I was with Peggy, and we've been together 16 years, and it was about 15 years ago, and she introduced me to a tent. I tried to sleep in them before, but I would go sleep on top of the table because I thought, what kind of stupid human sleeps in the bush in a tent? You can't see, you can't smell, and you can barely hear. And if something comes with big hairy arm or big fangs and canines, boom, stop or I'll shoot. Because I saw them with my flashlight and I heard them coming towards me. And that's why I never slept in tents. And, to me, it's just those times under those tarps and in those hammocks or on those piles of ferns and hemlock boughs out in the middle of the forest for weeks on end, sometimes months on end, when I used to go on a walkabout Tukalip, because I hated humans back in the early 1990s. I disappeared for every chance I could get. I went into the bush, up a river, up to the head of an inlet, up a river, up through the timber, to punch through the timber into the alpines, and walk in the fields of the house of our Lord, because it's just beautiful up there. And I understand why Sasquatches live out there so deep. And I remember one time being in the bush for months. I'd ran out of cigarettes, I'd ran out of coffee, weeks passed. All of a sudden I heard this helicopter and saw it land beneath me. And there's you can see the logging slashes, settings, and old roads below me. So humans. So I went down and I could hear a woman's twittering voice and I could hear men speaking. So I pulled the branch down and I looked, and there's the woman pouring the coffee from a thermos. And because I'm feral now, I've been in the bush so long without tobacco or coffee and living off the land, my nose could pick up the smell of that coffee. I knew it was with cream and sugar. I could smell that guy's sandwich that was peanut butter and jelly. And then that guy, when he lit up his cigarette, I almost began drooling because I could smell the nicotine and the smoke. And as much as I wanted to go out there and, hey, how y'all doing? My name's Tom. Hey, you mind if I get a smoke off you? Hey, you wouldn't mind if I can get a sip of that coffee? And, I wasn't hungry, so I didn't need any food. But a peanut butter and jam sandwich after months in the bush would have tasted mighty fine. I did like the Sasquatch, and I let the branch go up like a Sasquatch. I turned and I walked away and went back uphill. That's how much I despised humanity. I didn't want to be near them. And when people come to me and they're skeptics and they go, I'm a logger, I'm a forest ranger, I'm a this, I'm a that. I've been out there decades. I've never seen a Sasquatch. And I'm like, you ever notice sometimes when you're out there, all of a sudden you hear something, so you turn. There's a branch bouncing. There's no bird, there's no squirrel, there's no raccoon, there's no cougar cub or bear cub. Yeah, it's happened a couple of times. Why? Well, Sasquatch looked down, was watching me, and noticed you're a bush dancer. You're like the breeze in the forest, like a Sasquatch. You walked, but you didn't have to look where every foot was going to go on, like when the people come from the cities to the Olympic National Forest. They're tripping and sliding. They got to build them pathways because they can't walk in the bush out here. You watch them on the beach, all like that. Where I grew up running up beaches covered in seaweed at low tide and barnacles and rocks to tie up seine nets. For over 14 years, I was a tie-up man for commercial fishing, running up beaches. And, me, I'm like a rock hopper penguin. I just dance on the beaches. And so the Sasquatch, when it pulls the branch down and watches you and notice you because you're a logger, a forest surveyor, a prospector, a hiker, a mushroom picker, and well-versed hunter, it knows you're a perceived threat. So what it does is it pulls the branch down further, lets it go, turns and walks away. And the bouncing branch is telling you, I saw you. I know you're here. I respect you by you doing your business and going about what you're doing here, and I shall do the same. One time I saw that and I knew what it was. And being in my early 20s and a grizzly bear hunting guide with a 375 H&H over my shoulder, I ran for the bouncing tree, punched through the forest wall at the edge of the lake, looked up, and there walking up the slope of the second growth timber was a big lumbering male Sasquatch. And he just turned and looked at me, giving me that middle finger grimace. Didn't give me the middle finger, but that's what a grimace is from a Sasquatch. He's telling you, out of here. Don't do that. So I've had a lot of skeptics go, wow, the next time we go elk hunting at the cabin, me and my brothers, we're going to have to go watch for that Sasquatch because you think that's what it is? I'm like, no, I know that's what it is. So that's what I bring to Sasquatchology. I lived in the bush. I was feral human for quite some time at one time. I trapped out there. I commercial fished the entire British Columbia coast. I interacted with homesteaders and Indian tribes in isolated villages you can only access to this day by boat or float plane. No roads. And I was always there, Tommy 10,000 questions for a lifetime. Hey, what do you know about Sasquatch? Oh, let me tell you about books. Well, let me tell you about Gogich. Oh, I'll tell you about Hawakus or Steamtum. And that's when I would find out that there's actually a small hair-covered bipedal creature that I've seen in my potlatch ceremonies called bakus. But it's known as the little people, stick people, and many tribes and others throughout North America, Sasquatch Island, talk about that small 3-4 foot bipedal creature. But that's for another time when you invite me on your show.
The buckwhats are fascinating. I think the Cherokee term would be little people.
Yes.
So some people call them stick Indians.
Yeah.
My father-in-law actually saw what I think was a buckwhas
Wow.
at a coal mining tipple here in the state of Virginia.
Huh.
He
That's
said it was
interesting. I've never seen them. I've heard them and smelled them, but I never did see them. I could just hear them rushing through the ferns and low shrubbery and scared the bejesus out of me. I turned and ran down that low water beach and jumped my speedboat, pushed it off, and got out of there. I swear, if we went back and measured my footsteps, it would have been a bigger stride than a Sasquatch. I was running so fast.
They have a tendency towards violence if you kind of encroach on their
Yes.
territory. And the Cherokee belief is if you find anything in the woods, if it's helpful, if you find a knife, a basket, an arrowhead, anything that you find in the woods that's helpful, you have to tell, hey, you know, before you pick it up and take it, you have to tell, hey, little people, you know, I'm taking this. And then you have to leave them something too. So it's like you're taking something and leaving something. But yeah, it's fascinating. Mick has a question, but it feeds into one of the questions that I was going to ask Thomas. Tell us about what your beliefs are on aggression in Bigfoot.
So in 2007, I was sued for $640,000, and I lost my $250,000 tour boat, my house that was almost paid off, worth almost 170 something thousand off Indian Reserve on Vancouver Island. I lost my $60,000 sea kayak fleet. Over almost $80,000 of my money was garnished overnight from 2 bank accounts because of the judgment that befell upon me for defamation of character. My common law wife, the mother of my 2 children, she was a social worker, so 2 months later she got a job in northern British Columbia coast off on the Queen Charlotte Islands. That's what they used to be called. We call it Haida Gwaii now, after the Haida Indians that lived there. But we went there, and 8 months later she pointed to the door and told this Indian to F off, to leave. And when I packed my stuff up, I knew that when I would be boarding the ferry on March 19th, 2008, my young daughter and son would never live under my roof again until they were over 18 and adults. Because there's 2 things we Indians fear in North America, and one of them isn't the Sasquatch. It's the police who take our parents and the social workers who take our children. And I knew my ex-monster, being a social worker and non-Indian, I didn't stand a snowflake's chance of existence or life or success like it does in hell of ever having my children live under my roof again. And I was correct. Now I have, back with my kids and that, and have a relationship with them, positive, which is great. But a few years ago, they went 3.5 years without speaking to me or phoning me because they were so contaminated by the poison of my ex-monster. So I went postal in the ferry ride on the 19th of 2008, March, going to Vancouver Island for 2 days. I snapped. I was about to go postal. I had one plan. I was going to go hunt down the 2 SOBs that sold me, and I was going to do what I needed to do. But when I rolled into Campbell River on Vancouver Island after the ferry dropped me off and I drove some 3 hours south to Campbell River, a hotel that the religious manager always put a monthly quote up on the big, huge lighted thing. When I pulled into Campbell River and stopped at the red light, I looked up and it said, success is not defined on how high you reach. It's how high you bounce when you hit rock bottom. It took me a few hours to let it sink in. But by dark, I'd changed my mind. I wasn't going to go do what I was going to do to those 2 SOBs that sued me for $640,000. And I decided I would bounce. And I've been bouncing ever since. But I have snapped. And I know what it's like to go Sasquatch. When a Sasquatch, all of a sudden, nature's code, God's code. A younger male will always come up the ranks and take out a dominant alpha male from a pack clan setting. Wolves, bears. I've seen grizzly bears kill one another fighting over a mate in June. And black bears, and the list goes on, even in Africa and other places. So broad bush code is a young male is eventually going to come up and pound chest, get aggressive, and those 2 males are going to clash. And the big one's probably going to be beat to a pulp and almost dead when it crawls and runs away. It now knows that that young male is now the mate of his mate. What was his mate is now the dominant male for what was his two children or three children. And the clan he once ran that was numbered 20 Sasquatches, he now can't even go and eat the carcass of the elk. He can only go do like a coyote and pick the scraps after the Sasquatch clan has had their fill of that animal. And it has a choice. It can stay at the fringes of the clan and be like a coyote and come in after the scraps, or it can do like I almost did and snap and go postal. And we know what going postal means. It's a terrible term, but male, when their wife points to the door and tells them to get the beep out, and then it's the lawyers, the courts, the losing of the house, losing of all that money you two saved. She took it all, took the vehicles, got to get a court order to see your children. Next thing you know, your children are hating you. They won't talk to you and answer your phone or your text or your email or your message on Facebook. That human will snap and they'll go postal. Well, Sasquatches are just big, hairy humans of the night. And sometimes they lose their perfection and they too snap and they go postal and they go rogue and they become a hunter killer. And you find the places as I have found in Pacific Northwest, British Columbia coast and seen in Omaha Indian Reserve, where there's Omaha, there was coyotes, carcasses, guinea fowl, wild turkey, deer, dogs, all over this place and holes dug. And my Indian Omaha guide, Tom, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. This is a rogue killing jumping ground. And we got the hell out of there. And I've seen that in British Columbia. I've seen in the way up an inlet where it's just an accumulation of 3 dead bears, dead deer carcasses. You can see they've been eaten a little bit, but the rogue Sasquatch is so angered and full of hate. The ravens and the crows and the turkey vultures can't even go eat the carrion because the rogue won't allow it. That's how snap they are. That's why you'll see dead ravens and turkey vultures where these bone pile spread out accumulation areas are. And that's what it means by going rogue. They become like what we call a psychotic serial killer. Great example, Hannibal the Cannibal, even though that was a fictitious show, but it gives us a good example. Pig farmer picked on Fraser River, Vancouver, outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. How many women of the night did he kill and shove through the wood chipper and feed to his pigs? He died in prison, but now they're looking for his brother, who turned a dime on his older brother, but he didn't get jail time. But now all of a sudden they found out he's also a rogue human. He's killing prostitutes now up in Vancouver and they're hunting them down. So going postal, psychotic like that, is a human trait. An animal trait too. We hear of the lions and the tigers in India that just become the killers of humans because it's probably fun for them. Cat loves to play with an animal, doesn't necessarily. You'll see all felines. I've seen grizzly bears play with an animal and not kill it. A little mouse crawling around his hands while he's trying to have a snooze. He could kill and eat that mouse anytime, but he just let it go. But I've seen all types of felines, be it in the wild, from wild cats, domesticated cats, cougar, and to television, what I've seen of all the different felines out there, how they'll play with baby fawns and other animals, and eventually they'll kill it. But like I said, what I mean, it's fun to a psychotic individual, to a psychotic animal. And even say grizzly bears, when they get into that snap and get in that rage and go maul a human and kill him or almost kill him, they actually go psychotic. Something clicks in them. They go postal. And that's what those hunter killer Sasquatches are. And that's why I always say, fear the rogue. Because if you ever get around that aggressive Sasquatch, that is, and and you're an investigator, you've been around Sasquatches a few times, but your spidey senses is telling you that this is going sideways and hell in a handbasket real fast. Well, don't argue with your spidey senses. Get the hell out of there, because everything gets eaten out in the forest by a multitude of animals and pooped out. Don't be a steaming coiler from a rogue Sasquatch. Use your head. Use your spidey senses, because everything ends up being poop in the forest.
Eventually. I've got one more. Thomas, I know you're a big conspiracy theory guy, and it feeds right up my alley because I am too. What do you think are the best conspiracy theories on Sasquatch?
Mine. The Gatling gun was invented to kill Indians so that it could get cattle farms and agriculture and cities and railway lines across the continent. And we were shoved, the ones that didn't get hit with lead poisoning, we ended up in Indian reserves. And we're still there to this day. So the Gatling gun has been perfected to something that is way better than the first one. And it's backed up with night vision infrared and helicopters that can silence their rotors. And I seen a video in Eastern Washington where someone needed to see me when I was out there. And when I sat down in the restaurant, he handed his big iPhone to me, and I looked at a video, night vision FLIR, of a Sasquatch running, looking up at a helicopter some 40 feet above the pine trees on the eastern side of the Cascade Mountains, and it would jump right, swing right, it would swing left, it would swing right, it would come left again, and then do this big sprawling jump 15, 20 feet across the creek, and all of a sudden it went to snow. And I replayed it 6 times, and I handed his iPhone back, and I said, just like the Indians with the Gatling guns of old, that Sasquatch died. He goes, yes. He goes, we heard you talking about they're killing Sasquatches. I said, well, I remember 1991 in June going to northern Vancouver Island to my hometown of Alert Bay on the ferry and going up to my buddy Joe's house. And there he was in his carving studio. We're just young 20-something-year-old punks back then. And he introduced me to Art Bell on the FM radio station. And we sat there listening to Art Bell. And it was a guy who was no longer with the armed forces in the United States, but he was in security where he watched the monitors and would report what was taking place. But he said that where they were doing that train that would punch through the ceramic tiles in the desert and launch an ICBM during the Reagan era Star Wars, well, those tunnels are still there. And his job back in the late 80s, early 90s was to watch the surveillance cameras as these Sasquatch beings were going in with bedding and food and the family clan, till eventually the head of the base got orders, okay, we got to get them. So they dropped the gates, and they'd had canisters that they brought in, and they gassed them and put them to sleep. And he watched in the surveillance cameras these sleeping gassed Sasquatches being put on gurneys and handcuffed and strapped down and disappeared. So the military knows about Sasquatch. The government knows what they are. And they know that the United States will have the third recognized indigenous tribe to the Inuit up north in Alaska, the North American Indian, and now the Sasquatch is the third Indian tribe. In Canada, we have 3. We have First Nations, which I am, Inuit up north in the Arctic, and what you guys in the States call Cherokee, we call Métis, the ones of 2 bloods. They have indigenous recognition 5 years ago. And we indigenous people of the 2 countries cost billions of dollars a year. We can, if we want, affect the GDP, the gross domestic product, by saying no to your pipelines, no to your fracking, no to your drill baby drill, because we're going to tie you up in court for decades, because we've done it in Canada and still do it. So the government doesn't want another Indian tribe recognized. They already have the DNA with the blood samples, and the list goes on. And they know what Sasquatch is. And that's why they're doing everything they can to eradicate them. You got to remember that the Aborigines of Australia were considered flora and fauna until 1974. They weren't even a human. That's in all 3 of our lifetimes. And 1961, prior to me being born in 65, my people were considered wards of the government. we didn't have the right to vote or have a passport because we weren't considered Canadians. We were Indians. So that same mentality is there, and I firmly believe the governments are hunting down the Sasquatches, and that's why we're seeing such an increase, even here in Forks, Washington. Either side of Forks, Washington, our Sasquatch is being seen from time to time and heard quite a bit. You go to anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, California, Omaha Indian Reserve, British Columbia, Alberta, and we're seeing a big spike in urban edge Sasquatches coming into our backyards while we're REM sleeping and snoring in our beds upstairs or in our bedroom. They can come and listen, know our TVs are off, our lights are off. They could hear us snoring and farting, and they know it's time to go to the outbuilding with the freezer, with the game and the fish and the extra Costco meat, or go to that other building, which is the outbuilding for the poultry feed for the chickens or whatever you got, or your livestock feed, or go into the barn storage area and go to where the grain is for the cattle piled up in tons upon tons. Go to where the corn is for the animals and go to the greenhouse and with opposable thumb undo the wire, open the door like I've recorded on numerous occasions, and go in there, but not take all the tomatoes or food that's growing or on the windowsill ripening. Just take a couple. And it's indicative of all the Sasquatches coming into our urban edge. They're very respectful. They don't take all the food, except for corn and husk. We just seen that in the Olympic Peninsula reported to us at the beginning of fall. Guys been feeding Sasquatches, put out corn. That was the only time they took all the husks off the corn, but the cobs were never seen again. And that's the only time they didn't just take a little bit. They took all of it. So conspiracy, call it what you want. I don't think it's conspiracy. Would you say that the killing of Indians in Canada and the US was a conspiracy back in the 17 and 1800s? So the killing of Sasquatches in the 2000s in this new millennium, is that a conspiracy? No, it's something we should know our history so we're never destined to repeat its failures. Drill, baby, drill is the new era. But maybe is it kill, baby, kill when it comes to the Sasquatch? That's what I'm worried about.
Good point. Billy, that's all I've got, bro.
Well, we appreciate it, Tom. We had a good time.
Thank you very much. Yep.
We had a good time.
And everyone,
Sasquatch
Island. Sasquatch Island on
Yep.
Facebook, website.com, Sasquatch Island YouTube channel, even on TikTok. And when you go to the website, you'll see my email, my phone number. If anyone wants to chatter like Sasquatches about Sasquatches, give me a call. Just don't open the door of woo. I don't get into that woo stuff.
Well, we appreciate it, Tom. Now, can you hang out for a little bit while we close the show out, and then we'll come back?
Sure.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. All right. And we'll thank everybody for coming on tonight. We had a lot of people in the chat. So if I missed somebody, I apologize. We had Richard Sykes come in. He actually came in earlier and had mentioned something. But Richard, if you want to contact us by email or whatever, it's Sasquatch radio@gmail.com. Wouldn't mind conversing with you about your site. We got Tennessee Cherokee. We've got Thomas Steenberg. Hey, Tom. Glad to have you in.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Yeah. Earl Magram. Let's see. Digger Dog, as always. We had Nick, of course. He's always here. Everybody's still waiting for that meatloaf. I'm not. Cherokee. Let's see. Tennessee Cherokee. Let's see. Yeah. Mick's ex-wife's mom or whatever. Meatloaf, like a landmine. You don't want to get anywhere near that. Let's see.
Pete Wilson?
Yep, Pete Wilson, George Garcia. And George, I apologize. I'm not sure why you didn't get a notification because I sent all that stuff out. Who knows? Facebook and the internet has a mind of its own sometimes. R. Garland. I think I got everybody. If I missed anybody, I apologize. So thank you guys for coming on. We had a bunch of people in there live too, but sure we'll see you guys log into the chat. That way we can converse with you. So we want to thank everybody. We will be back next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, with another. Actually, we got an eyewitness, and this is a fresh sighting from actually this month. So we've got an eyewitness sighting that's going to be on next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. So we'll get them on here. But until next week, you guys have a great rest of the week, and we'll see everybody then. Good night, everybody.
Night, everybody.